Just 1 minute ago, Parliament fell into complete shock. In a moment nobody expected, Nigel Farage launched a fiery, unstoppable attack against Keir Starmer. A clash so intense that the entire chamber froze. What followed felt like an earthquake inside Westminster. And within seconds, chaos erupted on the Labour benches. The atmosphere inside the House of Commons was already tense. But no one imagined what was about to unfold. The chamber was calm, quiet, almost too controlled, until Nigel Farage rose to his feet with a look that warned everyone something explosive was coming. The moment he began speaking, every MP turned their head, sensing that the next few minutes would be nothing short of historic. Farage's voice cut through the silence like a blade. He didn't begin softly. He didn't warm up. He went straight for the heart of the debate, calling out what he described as a complete collapse of leadership under Keir Starmer. His tone was cold and sharp, and the room shifted instantly. Even the Labour MPs, who normally shouted back, fell silent, waiting, or perhaps bracing, for what would come next. Starmer sat stiffly, eyes narrowing, hands clenched, trying to maintain the calm image he had built over months. But Farage wasn't slowing down. With every sentence, he pushed harder, exposing contradictions, highlighting failures and questioning decisions with precision and confidence. It was the kind of attack that left no space for interruption, no room for escape. As Farage continued, murmurs began spreading across the Labour side. At first they were small, confused whispers, exchanged glances, uneasy shifting in seats. But within moments the whispers grew louder, turning into waves of discomfort. Something was breaking inside the chamber. The usual unity of the government benches started to crack as MPs looked at each other, unsure whether to defend, deny, or simply remain silent. Farage pressed on, quoting past speeches, pointing to recent controversies, and hitting pressure point after pressure point. Every word was controlled, every line delivered with force. It wasn't just an argument, it was an open challenge, a direct confrontation that left even the speaker momentarily speechless. Starmer attempted to interrupt, but his voice didn't carry the strength it usually did. Before he could finish the sentence, Farage countered sharply, exposing inconsistencies and bringing the entire chamber back under his control. It was rare, almost unheard of, to see an opposition leader lose command of the room so quickly, and then, the moment everyone would remember unfolded. A sudden break in the Labour benches. One MP stood up abruptly, frustration written across their face. Another followed, then another. Within seconds, multiple MPs shifted, some leaving their seats, others stepping back, unable to handle the rising heat of the confrontation. It wasn't an organised exit. It was scattered, messy, panicked. The tension had reached a point where staying in the chamber felt impossible. Gasps echoed across the room as people noticed the disruption. Farage paused only for a second, watching the movement with cold satisfaction, before delivering one of his most powerful lines of the day. A line that landed like a hammer, echoing around the chamber and locking the moment in political memory. The speaker tried to restore order, but the chamber was slipping away from control. Reporters in the gallery leaned forward, scribbling furiously as the scene unfolded in real time. What was supposed to be a routine parliamentary session had transformed into a dramatic showdown, a moment charged with intensity, conflict, and an undeniable shift in momentum. The country, watching live broadcasts, felt the shock ripple outward. This wasn't just a clash of opinions. It was the kind of confrontation that reshapes political narratives overnight. Farage remained firm, unshaken, ready for more. Starmer looked cornered, pressured from all sides, battling to regain control. But Parliament had already changed. The mood, the balance, the tone. Everything felt different now. And this was only the beginning. The chamber did not settle after the first wave of MPs stepped out. In fact, the tension only grew heavier, thicker, almost suffocating. Nigel Farage stood like a storm that had only started to gather strength. He glanced across the room, taking in the shock, the confusion, the fear spreading across the Labour side. It was the kind of silence that didn't signal calm, it signalled defeat. Farage leaned slightly toward the dispatch box, gripping it with both hands as he prepared for the next blow. His voice came out deeper, louder, filled with the confidence that made even the backbenchers sit upright. If this government cannot answer a simple question, he declared, then perhaps this government cannot lead a simple nation. The line landed with force. A heavy, stunned hush swallowed the entire room. Starmer attempted to regain control, rising to his feet with a stiff, tense movement. His usual calm expression had been replaced by something far more fragile, a flicker of irritation mixed with something closer to panic. This chamber will not be used as a stage for theatrics, he insisted, but even his own side could hear the strain in his voice. Farage didn't wait. Theatrics? No, sir. This is accountability, and it seems that's the one thing this government cannot handle. The timing was perfect. The room shuddered with gasps, mutters, shifting bodies. Every eye jumped between the two men, sensing the confrontation was turning into something far more intense than a simple debate. Labour MPs tried to shout back, but their voices were scattered, uncoordinated, drowned by the power of Farage's momentum. A few attempted to defend Starmer, but every argument collapsed the moment Farage responded. He came prepared, with facts, statements, contradictions, dates, and every political misstep he believed Starmer had made in the past months. Every point was delivered like a hammer striking steel. Even the speaker struggled to contain the rising noise. He repeatedly called for order, his voice cracking through the chamber, but nothing could slow the energy that Farage had unleashed. The clash had become too big, too loud, too uncontrollable. At one point, Farage lifted a stack of papers, documents filled with quotes, timelines and statements. He didn't need them. They were only proof. "You know what this is?" he asked, waving the papers slightly. "This is the list of promises you made but never kept. A list long enough to fill a library." Laughter erupted from the opposition benches. Starmer's expression hardened, but the damage was done. Cameras zoomed in on every reaction, the smirks, the whispers, the discomfort. It was the kind of moment journalists dream of. Raw political drama unfolding at full speed. Another Labour MP rose suddenly, attempting to challenge Farage's claims. But Farage turned toward him with a sharp, piercing stare. "Sit down," he said calmly, "until you have something real to defend." The MP froze, visibly shaken, and slowly lowered himself back into his seat. The entire chamber exhaled in disbelief. It was rare, almost unheard of, to see such dominance in debate. Starmer tried once more to intervene, raising his voice over the chaos. "This is not leadership, this is chaos," he declared. Farage returned fire without hesitation. "Chaos! The only chaos here is on your benches. They are walking out on you, not on me. They flee because they cannot defend what they support. And you call that leadership? It was brutal, cold, precise. And the reaction was immediate." More movement broke out on the Labour side. Another MP left the chamber, then another. This time it wasn't confusion, for it was resignation. Their expression said everything. This fight was already lost. The speaker slammed his hand on the desk. "Order!" he demanded, but the room was slipping beyond his reach and Farage wasn't finished. He leaned forward again, delivering his final strike of the section. "If this is the government's idea of strength, then Britain deserves better, much better." A ripple spread across the chamber. The tension turned electric. The stakes had just risen, and everyone knew the next moments would decide how this confrontation would be remembered. And Parliament braced for impact. The energy inside the chamber had shifted into something almost unrecognisable. It no longer felt like a debate. It felt like a full-scale confrontation, a moment carrying the weight of a political turning point. The eyes of the nation were fixed on Westminster, and everyone inside the room seemed to sense that what happened next would echo far beyond these walls. Farage stood unwavering, breathing steadily as if he had prepared for this exact moment for years. Starmer, meanwhile, struggled to maintain composure. The pressure around him was building like steam, trapped inside a locked chamber. Every whisper, every shuffle, every camera flash tightened the atmosphere even more. The Prime Minister attempted to speak again, trying to project authority. But before he could even finish his opening line, Farage raised his voice with a calm, steady interruption. "No more excuses," he said. "The country has heard enough of those." This time, the interruption wasn't just a political jab. It was a direct challenge. Starmer paused, visibly irritated, but the hesitation only made the moment worse. It signalled uncertainty, weakness, and Farage seized it instantly. You had every chance to lead, Farage continued, pointing directly toward the government benches. You had every opportunity to prove your vision, yet here we stand, watching your own MPs walk out because they can no longer defend what you claim is progress. The words struck the chamber like thunder. Even opposition MPs who rarely agreed with Farage couldn't deny the power of the statement. The Labour benches were shrinking, empty spaces widening with every passing minute, creating a visual symbol of retreat right in the heart of Parliament. Starmer pressed his palms against the dispatch box, leaning forward as if trying to reclaim control. This House deserves a debate, not a demolition, he insisted. But the chamber didn't respond. The silence that followed didn't help him. It exposed him. It gave Farage the opening he needed. A debate? Farage replied, his voice growing sharper. You call it a debate when half your side refuses to stay in the room? When they cannot defend your decisions? When they fear being held accountable? He shook his head slowly, letting the words sink in. This isn't a debate. This is a collapse. And you know it. Gasps rang out again. Political shockwaves rippled through the chamber as MPs shifted in their seats, some leaning forward, others frozen in place. Reporters scribbled so quickly their pens scratched across the notepads like static. Starmer attempted one final push, raising his voice in frustration. You are twisting reality. But Farage struck even harder. Reality. Reality is what the British people live every day. Reality is what your government avoids. Reality is what your own MPs cannot defend. Reality, he said, pausing as the chamber leaned in, is walking right out of the door behind you. The gallery erupted with noise, shock, disbelief, even scattered applause before the speaker slammed down for order again. But order was impossible now. The atmosphere was too charged, too volatile, too explosive to be contained by procedure. Farage's next words were slower, quieter, but delivered with chilling precision. You cannot lead a nation when you cannot even keep your chamber together. That single sentence sent a shiver through the room. Starmer's expression shifted for the first time. Not anger, not irritation, but something far more vulnerable. Awareness. Awareness that the narrative had slipped out of his hands and into the grip of his opponent. Awareness that the nation was watching this unravel in real time. Awareness that this moment could define him for months, maybe years. Another Labour MP rose, shaking their head with visible frustration, and left the chamber without a word. Cameras caught the exit instantly, broadcasting it across the country. The symbolism was brutal. The timing was perfect for Farage. This, Farage continued, is not about politics. This is about trust. And today, the trust in your leadership is dissolving before our eyes. The chamber buzzed with restless energy. MPs whispered fiercely, some trying to regain composure, others openly acknowledging the scale of what they were witnessing. Farage stood firm, centred, unshaken, as if the chaos around him only fuelled his determination. Starmer, cornered from all directions, could do nothing but stand silently, absorbing every second of the moment. And as the tension reached its peak, the speaker rose, calling for calm once more, but the chamber had already passed the point of calm. Something bigger was happening, something irreversible, and the final blow was still to come. The speaker's calls for order faded into the background as the chamber continued to tremble with tension. Every MP, every journalist, every advisor understood that the moment had reached its climax. But Farage was not done. Not yet. His expression had shifted into something colder, more deliberate. He knew the final strike would define everything that happened next. The few remaining Labour MPs sat rigidly in their seats, trying to look composed, but the panic in their eyes betrayed them. Empty chairs spread across their benches like growing cracks in a collapsing wall. Starmer stood in the centre of this chaos, attempting to hold the line, but the weight of the moment pressed hard against him. His voice, once commanding, now struggled to rise above the storm. Farage stepped forward again, his voice echoing through the chamber with a calmness that made the moment even more intense. Prime Minister, he began, emphasising every syllable. The truth has already been revealed today, not by me, not by the opposition, but by your own side. Starmer stiffened, trying not to react. But Farage continued, unrelenting. They walked out. They abandoned this debate. They refused to defend your leadership. He paused, letting silence fill the room. And in politics, silence is confession. A wave of shock swept across the chamber. Even government backbenchers looked stunned by the bluntness of the words. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail of Starmer's tightening jaw, every flicker of unease in the government benches. Farage didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The quiet intensity made every sentence cut deeper. You call this unity? You call this strength? What we just witnessed is the clearest message this House could ever send. He turned slightly, facing the Speaker. A government losing the confidence of its own members cannot command the confidence of the nation. The line sent a jolt through the room. It was the most direct challenge yet, a blow delivered with surgical precision. The Speaker shifted uncomfortably, sensing the gravity of what had just been said. Starmer attempted to respond, gripping the dispatch box tightly. This government stands united. Farage cut across him instantly. United? Prime Minister! The only thing united in this chamber is the disbelief at what we have witnessed. His tone sharpened, gaining force. You did not lose control of a debate today. You lost control of your party on live television in front of the entire country. The Labour benches erupted in frantic whispers, some MPs burying their faces in their hands, others exchanging desperate looks as they realised the scale of the damage. What had started as a routine session had turned into a political disaster they could not reverse. Farage leaned even closer, delivering the final blow with a level of clarity that made the chamber fall silent. If your MPs cannot remain in the room with you, how can you remain in office for them? The room froze. For a long, heavy moment, no one spoke. Not the Speaker, not Starmer, not a single MP. The silence was louder than any argument that had been made that day. Starmer looked down, unable to mask the weight of the moment. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the papers in front of him. A small gesture, but enough to show the pressure had finally broken through the shield he always carried. Farage stepped back from the dispatch box, his expression steady and controlled. He had said everything he needed to say, and he knew the impact would ripple far beyond the walls of the chamber. Only then did the Speaker rise, his voice low and heavy. Order, order, he repeated, though the chamber remained too stunned to respond. He looked at Starmer with a seriousness that hinted at the magnitude of the confrontation that had just unfolded. This House will suspend. The words echoed across the chamber and the reaction was immediate. MPs rose from their seats, some in silence, some in frantic conversation. Advisers rushed forward. Journalists sprinted toward exits to file reports. The tension that had built to explosive levels finally spilled outward, flooding the building with urgency. As Starmer slowly gathered his papers, the cameras captured the moment the entire country would remember. The image of a Prime Minister standing alone, surrounded by empty seats, shaken by the most dramatic blow he had faced in Parliament. Meanwhile, Farage walked away from the dispatch box without looking back. He didn't need to. He knew the impact was complete. The narrative had shifted. The chamber had witnessed it, and the public was already reacting. Outside, the news alerts were already flashing across screens. Commentators were scrambling to make sense of what had just happened. Analysts were calling it a turning point. Social media was exploding, and inside Parliament, the fallout was only beginning. The confrontation was over, but the shockwave it created was just getting started.